In this video, we will see the process for setting up tax codes. We'll look at the business trigger, which leads to us having to run the process, the data we need to know to run the process. We'll look at the steps that we need to follow in the idea screens, the output of these steps, and then talk about dependencies, say other business processes that depend on this particular one, and exceptions if applicable. Alright, so talking about the business trigger, we may need to create a new tax code if we are going to start operations in a new jurisdiction. Say for example, we might be operating in a country, in Iraq as an example, and then we want to go ahead and start production or exploration or operations in general in Kurdistan. And when we do that, we need to start capturing a different set of taxes, for example. In Colombia, another example, you might be operating a certain department, as it's called in there, or province, and then if you move to a different province to operate, you may have to start tracking taxes for the province needs. So each province may capture or may levy taxes. So we start operating in a new province and start to track those taxes levied by the new province. There may also be a tax reform and new taxes need to be tracked. And so to do so, we need to go ahead and create a new tax code. Or there may be a change in percentage, say, to an existing tax code. So we can do that as well. And this different rate may apply, say, if our company's has a change in say the tax regime that needs to be responded to. So some countries have different taxes for companies in the exploration phase, to companies in the development phase, to companies in the production phase. So depending on where you're at, you might have to raise new tax codes if you have a change in those spaces. As for the data involved, we need to know the tax authorities, the tax types, tax rates, and the FQA elements that are going to be affected. So for example, if we start to track VAT tax, where is that VAT going to be coded? So to what elements of the FQA, we need to know those elements. As for organizational data, we need to know the entity and the ledger ID. No transactional data is required for this process. Regarding the process, we need to go to the Purchase Taxes module. We need to go to the tax code screen, enter the new tax code name, provide the description. We need to then enter the tax rate total, enter the tax type, so is it withholding, VAT, incremental, then the ledger ID, and provide the FQA and tax authority for each line of the tax code. We also need to provide the rate for each line, and the rate for the sum of all the rates for each line must equal the tax rate total. For example, I might have a tax code, a composite tax code that adds up to 21%, and I have 3 lines of FQAs that are affected when we use this tax code. Those 3 lines, the percentages, must add up to the tax rate total. After we do this, we can save, and the tax code is now available for use. Looking at the process and ideas, we can click here or go to tax codes. We will enter the entity ID, then a tax code, the tax code itself. So we can do, say, for example, VAT at 8%. We provide a description. Then the short description, if we wanted to do that. We can then provide the total tax rate. We cannot use the percentage character there, just the number. Then the tax type, VAT, will enable the tax expense accounts tab. W, withholding, will enable the tax payable accounts, and incremental enables tax expense accounts. So we're going to use V for VAT, which is the most common one. And once we're here, we can provide the FQA coding. So this line is going to go, say, to this entity, this account, wildcard for the AFE, and we'll talk about wildcard in a moment, then null for the other elements, and then we can provide the tax authority. This tax authority should exist before we go into this screen. Otherwise, we need to create it. Now, let's say that this line is for 4%. So we'll just do the 4 there. And then we have another line here. And we continue coding this line. It's going to go to null, AFE, wildcard, cost center, just as an example. And then another 4%. So what does this wildcard do? This wildcard makes it so that this element, which has the wildcard, is going to inherit. It's going to be inherited from the invoice line items. So say I had an invoice and I had a particular AFE in the invoice line. That AFE is going to be used in this FQA coding as well. And that is usually the case when we have VAT tax. So when we are tracking VAT tax, we might want to track it, say, by AFE or by some other element, maybe cost center, field, some other element of the FQA. If we want to do that, instead of doing reclasses and manual work of that nature, we can go ahead and use the wildcard. We can also have the system assign just a couple of the characters, a few of the characters of the element. So I can fix part of the element and then the other characters can be derived. So the wildcard makes it very flexible in how we want to track, say, in this case, VAT by AFE. As you can see here, I can have two lines that will add up to the 8%. Once I'm done here, I can go ahead and save. Now that I have saved, even though I don't get a report or anything of that nature, when I go back, the tax code is going to be in the drop-down list. So regarding the output, we have a tax code that has been created. And if we wanted to correct that tax code, we could. So we could go here, or make any changes to it, I mean, not just correct it. Maybe there's something wrong with it, but if I wanted to make changes to it, I could simply go and look at the drop-down after I enter the entity name, and then we can go ahead and make changes to this. Say, for example, I want this to be fixed, and make that change, and after doing that, I can go ahead and make a change to this field, and then save. So that's, if I ever need to go in and make a change, all I need to know is the VAT code, the tax code, I mean, and the entity code, and then I can go in and make change to the tax code. As you can see, tax codes are defined by entity. So if I need the same tax code in a different entity, I need to create it in that entity as well. As for dependencies, once the tax code is available, we can now use it for AP and ART invoice entry. So both those screens for invoice entry have a tab for tax codes or for taxes. So it's either the tab or in the line item screen, we can go ahead and select the tax code that we just created. We can also use the tax codes in particular for in the ART cash receipt screen for withholding tax. Thank you. Well, before we finish the video, as for exceptions, we have the case of Argentina. In that case, we cannot use the same process. That process is a little bit more complex. Thank you for viewing this video guide.